Hi all, I'm Kata and I'm going to be talking about the connection between dogs' social learning from humans and certain behaviors in other social contexts with a focus on owner-directed behaviors. Social learning is basically learning by observing other individuals. It is prevalent in many species when there is an opportunity to learn from others, so mostly social species, and also when it is better or more safe than individual trial and error learning. What's special about dogs is that the other individual they learn from can be another dog, but it can also be a human. The predecessors of this study are Pongratz et al.'s detour studies from more than 20 years ago. They found that dogs successfully learn how to detour around the V-shaped fence to get a reward from both familiar and unfamiliar demonstrators, so both from the owner and an unfamiliar experimenter. But they found that there are still considerable individual differences in performance. They later found that social rank plays a key role in this variance in performance. Dogs from multiple dog households that were considered dominant learned better from unfamiliar human demonstrators, while subordinate dogs learn much better from unfamiliar dog demonstrators than dominant dogs did. The fact that social rank affects social learning raises the question if other, especially social factors, influencing dogs' social behavior might have a similar effect. In our case, the factors examined were certain behaviors towards the owner that are usually considered problematic. Specifically, we expected that dogs that have a more harmonious relationship with the owner, with higher obedience and lower aggression, would show better performance in a social learning task. We also expected to find that familiarity of the demonstrator have no effect, as this was the case in previous studies I mentioned. And finally, just as an addition, we also expected that positive training techniques that are built on the development of intense attention and the willingness to interact with the owner would associate with better social learning performance. We recruited 98 dogs from various dog schools. The owners were first surveyed about their relationship with their dogs with a focus on obedience and behavioral problems and the use of the training method shaping. Shaping is a very popular method in clicker training in which the animal learns behaviors step by step without any direct cues from the owner, only rewards after each successful step towards the behavior the owner wants. We thought that it would be interesting if experience with this mixture of individual and social training and learning method translate into problem solving. Then the dogs were grouped into three groups for the social learning test. A control group with no demonstration, a group where the owner demonstrated the task, and finally another group where the experimenter, an unfamiliar female, demonstrated the detour task. The task was the same that I talked about. As you can see here, there was a V-shaped fence and a reward was placed in the inner corner of the fence, so the dog had to go around the fence to get the reward. There were always three trials. In the control condition, in all three trials, the reward was just placed in the vertex of the V from above without detouring the fence. In the two demonstration conditions, the demonstrator in the second and third trial went around the fence, placed the treat in the vertex of the fence and came out at the other end so the dog could see the detour. After this, there were two additional behavioral tests, a takeaway bone test to test possessiveness and the rollover test to test resistance. In the takeaway bone test, the dog gets a very yummy bone from the owner and then the owner has to take this bone away from the dog in specific steps. In the rollover test, the owner had to physically roll the dog in a lying position without any cues or commands. These tests were put last because they might cause stress to the dog, which would affect the performance in the detour test. So, what did we find? From the questionnaire, we found two principal components that you can see on this slide. We used these for our analysis. So, there was one principal component we called giddy. These are the dogs that can be called back easily, but they run away anytime they see an opportunity. And these are the ones who are easily inhibited in unwanted activities, but also their inattention can sometimes impair their obedience. And the other principal component was grumpy. And these are the dogs who growl or bark when they don't like something. They growl when they are being groomed. Also, they might snap at others in the presence of the owner. But these are also the dogs who are very goal-oriented and persistent when they want something, and also who behave in an assertive manner. None of the variables examined, so the two principal components I talked about, or the behavior in the takeaway bone test or the rollover test, had an effect on the performance in the control condition. When the owner demonstrated the task, we could only see the effect of the demonstration itself, so dogs were better after they saw the demonstration, but we found some interesting things in the experimental demonstration group. Here you can see the effect of the demonstration. The three lines are the three trials, and as you can see, when the experimenter demonstrated the task and when the owner demonstrated the task, the second and the third trials were faster. When the experimenter demonstrated the task, grumpy dogs solved the detour faster after the demonstration. Also, dogs that gave up the bone at the first step of the takeaway bone test, so when being patted while chewing on the bone, solved the detour faster. The other thing we investigated is how being giddy or being grumpy affected looking back at the owner while doing the detour. Looking back at the owner during problem solving is popularly interpreted as asking for help, but it's certainly a communicative signal. So what we found that in both the owner demonstration and the experimenter demonstration group, at the control condition, more giddy dogs looked back less at the owner. While after demonstration, so in the second and third trial, we found the same effect of grumpiness. So more grumpy dogs looked back less at the owner after demonstration. What does it all mean? Well, the most interesting thing is that we only found effects when the demonstrator was the experimenter who is unfamiliar to the dogs. This might mean that the owner is so important for dogs that they pay keen attention to their behavior and what they do, regardless of possible behavior problems or other features of the dog. Dogs scored high on grumpiness were the ones who were better in the experimenter demonstration group. Grumpy dogs, as you can see, are the ones who are not just more grumpy, but also they are the more persistent ones and more goal-oriented ones who may be then more motivated to pay attention on how to solve the task. On the other hand, these are the dogs that are less tolerant for inconvenient and unpleasant experiences coming from humans. So these dogs might pay more attention to what an unfamiliar human is doing around them. In this case, doing a detour. The other interesting thing was that more giddy dogs looked back less at the owner when they were trying to solve the detour on their own. While, as you can see, one item in this component is inattention. So these are the dogs who have problems with attention. Interestingly, this effect disappears after the demonstration and gives its place to grumpiness. And lastly, it's very interesting that that dogs who were trained by shaping were also better after demonstration in the experimental demonstration group. And we think that this might be because the training method shaping promotes trying when the dog faces a new challenge. So what can we learn from that? Well, one thing we learned is that individual problem-solving capacity is not affected by those features that are connected to the social characteristics of a companion dog, of a family dog. So in the control group, when there was no demonstration, these social features that we investigated had no effect. This also means that social learning and individual problem solving are two completely different things for dogs. And the relationship with humans is reflected only in social contexts and not individual problem solving contexts. And as I said, dogs that have lower tolerance for unpleasant stimuli from humans are also the ones who are better at observing their behavior and learn from that. And with that, thank you for your attention.